today we are collecting Land Rover vehicles as part of the Red Cross's COVID response.
I think there'll be a variety of different uses. Going out to do independent living, checking on vulnerable individuals as emergency response will be there to support the communities and individuals.
The vehicles will be used to help vulnerable people to get their medicines, food, and just to help them in this difficult situation.
Land Rover have helped the Red Cross for a while, and certainly the vehicles that they're providing here, it's an amazing support they're giving us today.
Well, obviously the COVID-19 response that we have at the moment is hampered by the fact that everybody's having to work from home, both our staff and our volunteers, and of course people are self-isolating and sheltering, which means we have that issue that we have to overcome in supporting people. Land Rover have offered us the loan of 57 vehicles, which have enabled our crisis response team to respond in delivering food and medication and supporting people who may be sheltering or self-isolating at home. It's also allowed our ambulance support team to offer additional support and services to the NHS, taking the pressure off the NHS frontline teams, who at this moment in time are obviously under great pressure. We're unsure of exactly how many people are in isolation. We know there are hundreds of thousands of people who are at risk, who are sheltering and in isolation at the moment. And the use of the Land Rover vehicles will enable us to go to places we couldn't get to normally. So people who are both geographically and socially isolated will be able to reach. Internationally, Land Rover have been supporting work in Asian countries earlier this year as part of the Disaster Relief Alliance. And now here in the UK, they've loaned the vehicles to the Red Cross, which has enabled us to double our services and go out and reach people who are in isolation. We've recruited and indeed increased our recruitment of our community reserve volunteers. These are volunteers who are in the community, ready to respond when there's a crisis in their own community. And over the last few weeks, we've seen our numbers increase dramatically. But that's not to say that we don't want to recruit more, because obviously the more community reserve volunteers we have available, the more we can respond in communities across the UK. Obviously, we still welcome additional community reserve volunteers, and you can do that at our website, where you can also make a donation to our COVID-19 response work. Our website address is www.redcross.org.uk/kind.
We've come down from Edinburgh to collect our vehicles that Land Rover have given us for the duration of this pandemic. And we're going to be using them back in Edinburgh for our emergency response team. I'll be driving this back to Edinburgh today. It will then become part of the fleet for the emergency response team. The vehicles will be used to help mainly vulnerable people who aren't able to get out of their homes through self-isolation or because of their age. Families that have young children that they aren't able to leave home with 2 or 3 kids at a time. We'll be able to help them to get their medicines and food, and we'll be able to do all sorts of little jobs for people to just to help them in this difficult situation.
Travelled down from Edinburgh this morning by coach, obviously quite tricky in the circumstances, so we've large coach for keep our social distancing, and we'll collect these vehicles. We'll travel back up to Edinburgh. The intent, I believe, of these vehicles at this time is to use these in support of the COVID response, and I think there'll be a variety of different uses of going out to do independent living, checking on vulnerable individuals, doing runs to check that the medications are getting to the people who are in isolation as well. So we'll be whatever requirements is called upon us in our role as emergency response, will be there to support the communities and individuals.
So today we are collecting Land Rover vehicles to take back to Edinburgh as part of the Red Cross's COVID response. So obviously with everything happening just now, the Red Cross are providing volunteers to deliver medications, to assist with patient transport and to sort of help the vulnerable in various different ways. And obviously to get to those people's houses, we're going to require vehicles. So we're collecting them today. So they're going to be used mostly for providing supplies and logistics. So dropping off medication and food parcels and things for the vulnerable that aren't able to get. Obviously there's a lot of people that have been advised by the government to self-isolate. So I think sort of essentially a lot of people who are elderly, people who have lots of comorbidities have been advised to self-isolate. They still require the medications, they still require supplies. So the Red Cross are going to fill that gap and ensure that they can stay safe at home. And the vehicles will be used to allow us to get the things that they need to them. It's an amazing effort. I am very impressed by the kind of vehicles that we're being helped with. Land Rover have helped the Red Cross for a while. I've seen lots of Land Rover branded equipment around the Red Cross, and certainly the vehicles that they're providing here, slightly envious that I don't get to take one home at the end of the day. But yeah, 100%, it's an amazing support they're giving us today.